96.3 WORD.
Well, it seems like it didn't take very long for the Biden administration to start destroying American jobs. And of course, what they're saying now is if you were laid off the Keystone Pipeline, well, you just go get you one of these great solar panel engineer jobs. Maybe you could be a really awesome windmill engineer. Yeah, that's viable, right? Joining us right now is Mark Mix. He is the president for the National Right to Work Committee. They've got 2.8 million members in their public policy organization. He also serves as the president, Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, president there. Mark, welcome to the program, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Charlie, it's a privilege to be on with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
I remember it wasn't long ago in Charleston that the Association of Mechanical Engineers was coming in, and they were trying to unionize Boeing. And South Carolina and the members of Boeing down in Charleston said, no, we don't want that, by about 75%. But they keep trying to unionize. How does this hurt the American worker?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, Charlie, it's interesting you mentioned Boeing because we ended up representing the employees in South Carolina. We provided legal services to them, trying to defend their right to go to work for Boeing and to stop the National Labor Relations Board,
right,
which is a 5-member board here in Washington, to try to stop the opening of the facility that had already been built. And I think now they've gone from 1,000 workers then till 6,000 or 7,000 now, which is a great story for South Carolina and for the country, frankly. But, you know, look, organized labor, if they're providing a service that workers want, workers will choose to accept it and pay for it and be represented by it. But unfortunately, because organized labor is trying to use government as a means to compel people to join them and pay dues, that's not a really winning business proposition. You know, I want the governmental power to force you to pay me in order for you to work. I think American workers see through that. If unions can do something for them, then they're willing to participate and join voluntarily. But forced unionism doesn't work anywhere, and it doesn't work in South Carolina.
Right. It's a great thing that South Carolina is a right-to-work state. But Joe Biden keeps promising to make good, not just jobs, union jobs.
Well, Charlie, you know, your point about the Keystone Pipeline is an interesting one because it just turns out that while those workers, those union workers, where their union officials endorsed Joe Biden's presidency, they're now on the unemployment line, and those alleged green jobs, unfortunately, it looks like based on the what's coming out of the administration now, that the solar panels and the windmill pieces will be made in China because they will be trade partners, and therefore those will be jobs. So I guess those union members have to move to China to get those jobs. But
yeah, those
you
would
know,
be,
he has been a puppet of big labor for years and years and years, back during the early days of his Senate run, and you know, he counts on their money in elections, and if you can force someone to pay you for the privilege of working and then turn around and use that money to elect politicians, well, that's a pretty good deal, and he appreciates that. But look, only 6% of American workers are unionized in the private sector, and frankly, people get paychecks, they get benefits, they get retirement programs, they get all kinds of things. And I know you can't believe that, Charlie. If you're not in a union, you don't get a paycheck. But it happens. It happens everywhere across the country. And for South Carolina, it's made a real difference. I mean, in Greenville, you went from being the textile capital of the world to being an industrial engine of not only South Carolina, but the country, with Lockheed Martin and Magna and, you know, the Michelin. And South Carolina has become one of the leading tire producers in the entire world.
Sure. And
the right to work law is part of that equation. And that is give the workers the choice to support a labor union, but don't compel them.
Exactly right. So let's talk. There's a big debate over the minimum wage. And everybody just thinks this is only affecting like the lower skilled workers or whatever. But union contracts are tied to the minimum wage, aren't they? How does that also affect how much people are going to have to pay their employees?
Well, Charlie, you better be careful talking like that because you're right, and people will get angry about that. Some people, but you're absolutely right. The union contracts are generally predicated on a floor wage, and so if you raise the floor wage, you automatically raise the wages above it, and you have to. You can't think of a manager or someone who's been at a shop for 5 years making $15 an hour. Someone who got hired last week is now going to make $15 an hour. What happens to that employee that was been there for 6 years? Well, they need to be compensated too, and union officials understand understand that. In fact, it really is about raising the wages, not for the entry-level workers, because there'll be fewer and fewer of them if you impose a minimum wage on those kind of entry-level jobs that exist at that pay level. But it's for the folks that are already engaged. That's a dramatic pay raise. And interestingly enough, Charlie, you won't be surprised by this. Most union contracts, the union dues are a percentage of salary. So who gets the biggest raise? Yeah.
Oh, and the dominoes start to tumble, don't they? Unbelievable. So I wonder, Mark, talking with Mark Mix from the National Right to Work Committee, I wonder all these, if there were anybody, that union, I forget which union it was, but they had a banner on their Twitter page, and it had all of these workers holding up Biden-Harris campaign signs. I wonder if any of those folks lost their jobs that were pulling for this president who turned around and the first thing he did was kill their jobs.
Yeah. Well, you know this, Charlie. The Labor's International Union of North America endorsed Joe Biden. They had many employees on the pipeline. Mm-hmm. The pipe fitters and plumbers union had workers on the pipeline, and they endorsed Joe Biden. The building trades endorsed Joe Biden and it just goes on and on and on. And those workers are now on the unemployment line. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a right to work state like South Carolina and your union officials do that, what do? You say, you know what? I'm not going to pay you anymore for putting me out of work. But if you're in a forced unionism state like New York or California or Washington State and or Montana out there, which was part of the Keystone Pipeline, you have no choice. If you don't pay the union, you don't work. And so those folks are stuck. And the bottom line is their money was used to elect a president to put them on the unemployment line. It doesn't make much sense. And that's why right to work works.
You're right about that. So here you are, you've been laid off. And doesn't it seem like this administration favors environmental activists over hardworking Americans?
Well, I think so. I think, the executive order, the order on the Keystone Pipeline was just one piece of the so-called energy policy that Biden has. The other piece of it was denying any new permits or exploration on federal lands when it comes to oil and gas. I mean, the number of workers that are put out of business there is bigger than the Keystone Pipeline. And now you've got the environmentalists saying, you know what? We got the Keystone. Now let's go get the rest of the pipelines and shut those down. I don't know what they think they're going to build solar panels and windmills with if we don't have power to manufacture the pieces and the parts that are necessary to make us, quote, sustainable on natural energy or whatever they call it.
It just amazed me that right here with COVID and so many people out of work and so many families wondering what the future holds, that he pretty much solidified the future doesn't look very bright for the average American worker.
Well, America's been through these times before, and sometimes I think, Charlie, although the COVID thing is kind of unique, I mean, I don't know if we've been through this a long time, but, it's almost hubris to think that we're in the worst state we've ever been in as a country, and I think America is vital, and we will fight. Americans believe in what we are and an experiment in self-government, at least I believe that. I hope you do too. I think you do.
Absolutely.
And we'll work through this. We'll work through it. And what we have to do, Charlie, and what, the role that you play, which is so important, is making sure the people of Greenville and the area down there in Spartansburg know where these people stand on issues like this. It's, Tim Scott, your senator, was in a hearing for the new Secretary of Labor, and he had a little dialogue with him back and forth, and they were talking about this so-called PRO Act, which is a bill that's been reintroduced in the Congress that would repeal South Carolina's right to work law. And here's what Senator Scott said. He, quote, overnight, those 27 states, including South Carolina, would lose their ability to be right-to-work states. That is devastating for the economic future of this nation, devastating for those employees within those states, and frankly, a bad decision and a poor start for this administration. So Senator Scott summed it up pretty quickly about what, this policy about, the economics of Joe Biden's administration and what it means for the American worker. But there have been hard times before, and we've gotten through it. We just need to make sure in a country built and designed on but there have been hard times before, and we've gotten through it. We just need to make sure in a country built and designed on an experiment in self-government, that experiment includes us. We need to keep track of what our elected officials do. And boy, oh boy, it matters more. It seems like it matters more right now than ever.
Absolutely. And you can check out and you can keep up with what's going on. You can go to www.nlrb.org nrtw.org. You can check him out on Facebook or Twitter at Right to Work. Mark Mix, he is the president of the National Right to Work Committee. It's a pleasure talking to you, buddy. Thank you. We'll talk to you again soon. We'll keep on top of this, Mark.
Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. Great for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye. It's the Charlie James Show.